You just watched Caitlin Clark, the most important player in women's basketball, sit across from her teammate at a dinner table. And when pressed about committing to Indiana through 2029, she laughed. She deflected. She looked away. And then she said, with a smile that carried 10,000 pounds of subtext, "I'm only signed till next year." Aaliyah Boston kept pushing. Clark kept laughing. And if you know how to read between the lines, and on this channel, we always read between the lines, what you just witnessed wasn't a joke. That was a warning shot. That was a woman who has given everything to a franchise that keeps fumbling the bag, quietly letting the world know that her patience is not infinite and her loyalty is not unconditional. Welcome to Street Hoops. I'm Dre Fiver, and today we are pulling back every curtain, kicking down every door, and having the conversation that the mainstream sports media is too scared, too soft, or too sponsored to have. Is Caitlin Clark about to break up with the Indiana Fever? And if she does, is it going to get ugly? Let's set the table here, because context matters. Caitlin Clark came into the WNBA as the most hyped, most marketed, most watched rookie in the history of the league. We're not exaggerating that. We're not inflating it for content. That is simply, factually, undeniably true. The woman sold out arenas across the country. She broke viewership records. She put the WNBA on the radar of casual sports fans who couldn't have told you the difference between a WNBA game and a pickup game at the Y 2 years ago. She did all of that as a rookie. As a rookie? And what did the Indiana Fever front office do in return? What did the Three Stooges, and if you've been watching this channel, you know exactly who I'm talking about, what did they do to honor that, to protect that, to nurture that? They mismanaged the roster. They made questionable personnel decisions. They hired a head coach with more baggage than a Spirit Airlines flight at Christmas. And now, heading into what could be the final year of Caitlin Clark's current contract, the franchise is standing at a crossroads. And from where I'm sitting, they don't even seem to know it. Now, I want to be very clear about something before we go any further. This isn't about hating on Indiana. This isn't about rooting against the Fever. As a basketball fan, as someone who covers this sport because I genuinely love it, the absolute last thing I want is for Caitlin Clark to leave Indiana under a cloud of dysfunction and drama. That would be bad for her, bad for the league, and bad for the game. But bad things happen when organizations refuse to get out of their own way. Bad things happen when the people in charge prioritize ego over excellence, politics over product, and comfort over competition. And that is exactly what appears to be happening in Indianapolis right now. Let's talk about Stephanie White, because this woman's relationship with Caitlin Clark is one of the most fascinating and troubling dynamics in professional basketball right now. On paper, Stephanie White is the head coach of the Indiana Fever. She is responsible for player development, game planning, rotation management, and most importantly, protecting and maximizing the performance of her franchise player. That is her job. That is the most basic, fundamental requirement of her role. And based on everything we've seen, based on everything that's been reported, based on everything that her own behavior in press conferences has telegraphed to the world, she is failing at that job spectacularly. Think about what was described when the Fever announced, an hour before tip-off, mind you. 1 hour, that Caitlin Clark would not be playing due to load management. Not the night before. Not that morning when the team did their shoot-around. 1 hour before the game. The arena was sold out. Fans had driven hours. Families had bought tickets months in advance. Children showed up in Caitlin Clark jerseys expecting to watch their hero play basketball. And the Indiana Fever, as an organization, decided that the appropriate time to inform those paying customers that the one person they came to see would not be on the floor was 60 minutes before tip-off. As Craig Carton said on his radio show, and look, I don't always agree with Craig Carton, but when he's right, he's right. How dumb can you be? The WNBA is fighting for relevance. Caitlin Clark is the biggest gift that league has received in a generation, and the Indiana Fever, time and time again, treats her presence like an inconvenience rather than a privilege. Now, some of you are going to come to the comments and say, Dre, load management is normal. Every team does it. And you know what? You're not wrong. Load management exists. Rest management is part of modern sports science. I understand that. But there is a right way and a wrong way to handle load management for your franchise player. The right way involves communication with fans, with ticket holders, ideally with as much advance notice as possible. The wrong way is what the Fever did. And this isn't the first time. This is a pattern. This is a recurring theme with this organization. They keep making decisions that suggest they either don't fully grasp what they have in Caitlin Clark, or they do understand it and simply don't care. Both possibilities are terrifying. And here's the thing that really gets me. Here's what really separates this situation from your average sports drama. Caitlin Clark is not a passive participant in what's happening. She is not sitting back quietly cashing checks and letting the organization do whatever they want. She is watching, she is paying attention, and she is communicating. Maybe not in press releases, maybe not in dramatic public statements, but she's communicating in the way that athletes of her caliber always do when they're sending a message to management. She's communicating through her silence where there used to be enthusiasm, through the laugh at the dinner table that said more than any quote ever could, through the LeBron James comparisons that she herself has invited by publicly acknowledging that she and LeBron speak and that he shares advice with her. Now let me stop on that LeBron angle for a second, because I don't think enough people are taking that seriously. When Caitlin Clark says LeBron James talks to her, gives her advice, is watching her situation, that is not casual name-dropping. LeBron James, in the later stages of his career, became famous for signing one-and-one deals. 1 year guaranteed. Player option the second year. Why? Because he refused to be locked into a situation that wasn't serving him. He refused to give an organization the comfort of long-term security without them earning it. He went to Miami because Cleveland wouldn't build around him. He went back to Cleveland because they finally got serious. He went to LA because he wanted to chase history in a market that matched his ambitions. Every move LeBron ever made was intentional. Every contract structure was strategic. And now the most important player in the WNBA is telling you, openly, that she has been in contact with that man and absorbing his perspective. If you're the Indiana Fever front office and you hear that and you don't immediately go into emergency mode, something is very, very wrong with how you're reading this situation. Let me paint the picture of what a Caitlin Clark free agency situation actually looks like, because I think a lot of people are treating this like a hypothetical when it is rapidly becoming a reality. The New York Liberty, the Los Angeles Sparks, the Houston Comets, the Phoenix Mercury. Every major market team in the WNBA has to be drooling right now. New York especially, the Big Apple, as the transcript puts it, knows how to treat a star. New York has the market, the media infrastructure, the sponsorship ecosystem, and frankly, the culture to turn Caitlin Clark from a sports phenomenon into a global cultural icon in a way that Indianapolis simply cannot replicate. I'm not saying that to disrespect Indiana or its fans. I'm saying it because it's true. Market size matters. Media exposure matters. And if Caitlin Clark decides that she wants to maximize not just her on-court legacy, but her off-court brand and cultural impact, New York makes an almost unanswerable argument. Houston is interesting too. Phoenix has been rebuilding. And LA, if the Sparks can get their act together, represents the same kind of gravitational pull for female athletes that it does for every other entertainer and public figure on the planet. The point is this: Caitlin Clark has options. Real, serious, franchise-altering options. And the Indiana Fever should be operating every single day with the understanding that those options exist and that their job is to make Indiana the obvious, easy, enthusiastic choice. Instead, they keep making decisions that make the alternatives look more attractive by comparison. Now let me give you my personal take on the Three Stooges, because this channel has never been afraid to say what the suits won't. The leadership structure in Indiana, and I'm being generous by calling it a structure, has consistently shown an inability to operate at the level that Caitlin Clark's talent demands. This isn't about one bad decision or one awkward press conference moment. This is a philosophical mismatch. You have a generational player who came in ready to win, ready to compete, ready to be the face of a franchise that was finally going to matter, and you have a front office that seems more concerned with maintaining the status quo than with making the bold, aggressive, uncomfortable moves that building a championship contender around a player like Clark actually requires. And Caitlin Clark knows it. She's not naive. She didn't go to Iowa and build one of the greatest college careers in the history of the sport by failing to understand how organizations work. Here's a scenario I want you to sit with. Imagine it's the offseason. Caitlin Clark's contract year is over. The Indiana Fever front office sits her down. Her agent, her parents. And they slide a big, shiny contract extension across the table. Long-term deal. Maximum dollars. The kind of number that's supposed to make the conversation short and simple. And Caitlin Clark looks at the paper, looks at her agent, looks at her parents, and says no. Not because the money isn't right, but because the situation isn't right. Because she's done the calculation and she's decided that a ring, a real championship, not just a first-round exit, matters more to her than the comfort of staying somewhere familiar. That scenario is not fiction. That scenario is what is going to happen if the Indiana Fever does not radically change how they operate. And right now, I see very little evidence that a radical change is coming. The dinner clip is everything. I keep coming back to it because it's the most honest moment we've seen from Caitlin Clark when it comes to her future in Indiana. Aaliyah Boston, who by all accounts is one of Clark's closest friends on the team, a genuine relationship, not a PR talking point, is literally begging her to say she's staying. Fever till 2029, AB says it over and over, almost pleading, and Clark, every time, laughs it off, deflects, says something warm but non-committal. That is not the behavior of someone who is confident about her future with the organization. That is the behavior of someone who is keeping her options open and doesn't want to lie to her friend's face. There's honesty in that laugh. There's truth in that deflection. And if you're in the Fever front office and you watch that clip and you didn't feel a cold chill run down your spine, you're not paying attention. Let me talk about the WNBA as an institution for a moment, because this isn't just an Indiana Fever problem. Craig Carton said it plainly. The WNBA is dying to be the NBA. They're mimicking the structure, the scheduling, the star-driven marketing, but they keep tripping over themselves at the exact moments when they have a chance to capitalize on the attention they're getting. The league has been handed, on a silver platter, the kind of watershed moment that sports leagues spend decades praying for. A player who generates genuine, organic, mainstream cultural relevance, not manufactured hype, not a PR campaign, but real people genuinely caring about watching her play. And the response from the league and its franchises has been, at best, clumsy and at worst, actively self-sabotaging. You cannot announce an hour before tip-off that your most marketable player isn't playing. You cannot have a head coach whose relationship with the franchise player reads as tense and strained every time a camera is in the room. You cannot allow a front office to meander through roster decisions while the clock on your superstar's patience ticks down. These aren't advanced strategic concepts. These are fundamentals. This is entry-level franchise management 101. And the Indiana Fever keeps failing the exam. I want to be fair here, because fairness matters even when you're making a pointed argument. The WNBA has made real progress under Caitlin Clark's influence. Attendance is up league-wide. Television ratings have improved significantly. Sponsorship deals are coming in that would have seemed impossible 3 years ago. Some of that is Clark's individual star power, but some of it is the organizational and league infrastructure finally beginning to catch up with the moment. So it's not all doom and gloom, but you don't get to take credit for the rising tide while also being the organization that keeps drilling holes in the boat. Now I want to address the Stephanie White situation one more time, because I think it deserves more than just a passing reference. The dynamic between a head coach and a franchise player is one of the most delicate and consequential relationships in professional sports. When it works, it's magic. Phil Jackson and Michael Jordan, Greg Popovich and Tim Duncan, coaches who understood that their job, on some level, was to create the conditions for their best player to be their best player, while still maintaining structure, accountability, and team culture. That is the balance. That is the art. And when a head coach publicly, through body language, through press conference behavior, through the way they manage minutes and lineups and injury reports, signals anything other than complete unconditional investment in their franchise player, it creates a crack. And cracks over time become chasms. Everything that has been described and documented about Stephanie White's public behavior around Caitlin Clark suggests that crack exists. The visible relief at not being asked about Clark in press conferences. The management of Clark's playing time and injury status in ways that have frustrated fans and drawn criticism from analysts. The general sense, week after week, that the relationship between coach and player is not built on the kind of mutual trust and enthusiasm that a championship-caliber partnership requires. Now, maybe behind closed doors it's different. Maybe I'm wrong about this. I genuinely hope I'm wrong about this. But the evidence, as it presents itself publicly, does not support a rosy interpretation. And here is the brutal truth. It doesn't matter what's happening behind closed doors if the public perception is dysfunction. Because public perception shapes everything, from how other players view the franchise as a potential destination, to how sponsors make decisions about their investments, to how Caitlin Clark herself thinks about her future. If she's watching the same clips we're watching, reading the same commentary we're reading, and feeling the same vibes in that building every day, the calculus becomes very simple. Let me bring this home because we've covered a lot of ground and I want to leave you with something concrete, something real, something that frames exactly what's at stake here. Caitlin Clark is, right now, the single most valuable asset in women's professional basketball. Full stop. Not most valuable in terms of contract dollars. The WNBA's pay structure hasn't caught up with her actual market value yet, and that's a whole other conversation. but most valuable in terms of what her presence means for franchises, for the league, for the sport's cultural footprint, for the next generation of girls watching her play and dreaming about what's possible. She is a once-in-a-generation force. And the Indiana Fever has been gifted the opportunity to build something legendary around her. That opportunity has an expiration date. She said it herself. "I've only signed till next year." She laughed when her best friend pushed her on 2029. She publicly acknowledges conversations with LeBron James, the man who turned contract structure into an art form, who never stayed somewhere that wasn't serving his ambitions, who understood better than any player in a generation that loyalty without accountability is just habit. Caitlin Clark is paying attention. She is not naive, she is not passive, and she is not going to stay somewhere out of inertia when the rest of the league is watching and waiting and building their pitches. The Indiana Fever front office, the people in that building right now making decisions about next year's roster, next year's coaching staff, next year's organizational direction, they need to understand with absolute clarity what this moment demands. It demands urgency. It demands boldness. It demands a level of organizational competence and commitment that frankly has not been consistently demonstrated up to this point. They need to surround Caitlin Clark with players who make her better. They need a coaching staff that unlocks her potential rather than constraining it. They need leadership at the top of the organization that can look her in the eye and make a credible case that Indianapolis is the place where she wins a championship. Not just a promise, not just a contract, a credible case. Because if they can't do that, if they walk into that contract negotiation with a big number and nothing else, I genuinely believe Caitlin Clark is going to say no. Not out of spite, not out of drama, but because she's smart enough to know that money isn't the point. Legacy is the point. Winning is the point. And you don't build a legacy by staying loyal to an organization that hasn't been fully loyal to you. New York is calling, Houston is calling, and somewhere in Indianapolis, if anyone is paying close attention, the sound of that phone ringing should be keeping them up at night. That is the state of Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever. That is the reality of what's building right now. Quietly, beneath the surface of every press conference and every dinner table laugh and every non-committal smile. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is not clickbait. This is a woman communicating in every way short of a press release that she is not locked in, and an organization that keeps behaving like she has nowhere else to go. I'm Dre Fiver. This is Street Hoops, and we don't do sugarcoating on this channel. We call it exactly how we see it. Whether you agree or not, whether you're riding with Indiana or you're ready to see CC in a new uniform, you cannot look at the evidence and tell me everything is fine in Indianapolis. Something has to change. And we're going to be here every step of the way to cover it. Now listen, if this video gave you something to think about, if it made you feel something, if it lit you up or fired you up or even made you want to come to the comments and argue with me, do me a favor and smash that like button right now. Seriously, hit it. Tell the algorithm this conversation matters. Drop your take in the comments. Are you a Fever fan who thinks CC is staying? Or are you already mentally putting her in a New York uniform? I want to hear from you. And if you are not subscribed to Street Hoops yet, what are you doing? We are dropping fire consistently on this channel. No filters, no corporate sponsors telling us what we can and can't say. Just real basketball talk from someone who actually loves this game. Hit subscribe, hit the bell, and I will see you in the next one. Street Hoops, Dre Fiver. We out.